Welcome to the multi-award-winning Lion Salt Works Museum near Northwich in Cheshire. At present, guided tours around the museum are no longer possible. Instead, we hope this film and commentary will be an informative alternative. We all need salt to live. Without it, we become disorientated and cannot sweat. So salt has always been a very valuable commodity and historically expensive because it usually requires mining. This is the story of an open-pan salt-making site on the beautiful Cheshire Plain. It is not a museum about salt mining. It is much more interesting than that. It tells the story of how, for thousands of years, man used ingenuity and skill to make salt without mining beneath ground. How is this possible? How can the vast expanse of salt indicated in the dark pink part of this map possibly be accessed without mining? The answer is water. If you look closely at this cross-section, you will see a thin blue line running across the top layer of salt indicated in white. This is the brine stream, and occasionally cracks in the upper rock mean super salty water, 8 times saltier than seawater, reaches the surface and forms small brine pools. Early man quickly realized that by simply boiling the brine, salt crystals would form, and so started a tradition of salt making unbroken from the times of the Romans until 1986, when the Lion Salt Works closed. Let's go inside the museum, through the shop, past the cafe and pay desk, and look at the newly restored nodding donkey. The nodding donkey before you is the pump on site, named because it would go up and down like a donkey feeding. The pump is key to understanding open-pan salt making. For centuries, wild brine, as it was known, was collected from brine pools, but by the 19th century the technology existed to sink a brine shaft or borehole that would tap into the brine stream that flowed over the top layer of salt deep beneath the ground. The brine was then pumped to the surface by pumps powered by steam engines, before being stored in a brine tank. We are now in the galleries of the Red Lion. There is so much to look at here: an astonishingly well-preserved Roman lead salt pan, a fun animated film about medieval salt making, as well as pictures and artefacts about salt making, including this picture of what salt towns in Cheshire would have looked like about 100 years ago. Imagine how it would have been to live here with smoke billowing from every chimney, as well as steam escaping from pan houses through cracks in the ceiling. It also gives you an idea of how many open-pan salt-making sites there were in Cheshire. This display shows the reality of life for salt workers. Work was hard, physical and tiring. The pans of dangerously hot brine, producing clouds of steam, meant that hard physical labour was conducted without shirts on. It was also hazardous because the low-sided salt pans needed workers to pull in the salt crystals using long rakes, a dangerous balancing act. The shifts were also long, and some men worked on a piece basis, being paid for how many tons of salt they produced. Let's move on to the recreation of the manager's office. The story of the salt works involves 6 generations of the Thompson family. Their connection with the site stretches back to 1842. This enterprising family owned salt works, a boatyard and a shipping business. So when the site became a museum, all the original furniture for the manager's office and lots of the paperwork was saved. It was good the Thompson family kept so much of their paperwork, as it has given the museum an invaluable insight into how the works was run. At its peak, 40 to 50 men and women were employed at the works. While men made and dried and ground salt, women sewed salt bags and wrapped domestic salt. Not many museums have their own pub, but the Lion Salt Works is named for the Red Lion pub that stood on this site and is seen recreated before you. After a long day toiling over the hot salt pans, workers were seriously dehydrated and needed a drink or two. The area around the Lion Salt Works had many open-pan salt sites, and there were pubs all over the local area. Workers drank beer, but interestingly, also laced it with salt to replace the salt lost from their bodies when sweating during the day. Just like the Romans, they knew lack of salt causes cramps and dizziness. Here by the bar is what happens to leather shoes if subjected to brine on a daily basis, and more imaginatively, a salt ship created from dipping regularly in brine, just like you might make a candle with wax and a wick. Let's move on to Pan House 3, starting with its furnaces. Creating salt was a great deal more complicated than just lighting a fire under a large pan. Many different sorts of salt were produced, requiring different temperatures. For instance, the mass-produced common salt took between 1 and 3 days to produce and was created at 70 to 76 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, fishery salt, required to pack fresh fish from the sea in places like Canada, needed to be coarse, hard and slow melting. It took 7 to 14 days to produce at about 38 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So getting the furnaces to the right temperature and maintaining them at this level was both a skilled and physically exerting job. And so up the stairs from the furnace below to the salt pan above. As you see, this is a huge pan about the size of a single tennis court. Here the museum recreates how the steam-laden pan house would have looked and felt. Imagine how the hot steam would have risen from the pan. See how the salt workers toiled, sweating and stripped to the waist. Imagine how it would have been working long shifts, walking on the slippery, wet, brine-spilt boards, being careful not to lose your balance as you stretched out to draw in the heavy salt crystals. Salt making was seen as a dark art, and salt workers guarded carefully the sort of things they added to the salt pan to make the salt crystals form. Today we know this included adding bullock's blood, egg, soft soap and glue. Look at the tubs on the wheelbarrows. These tubs were filled with compacted wet salt, ready to be turned out to dry as a single lump next door in the hothouse. This is one of the hothouses, also known as the hottie. In here, the heat from the hot air in the kilns was used to dry out the salt. The smell in the hothouses would have been an unpleasant mixture of humid air and sulphurous waste gases from the burning coal. The drying process usually took about 2 weeks. What you see today is dark, but in the day this room would have been white with drying salt blocks, like this picture shows. Salt pans required weekly cleaning and descaling thanks to the corrosive effects of salt. Just look at this unrestored pan and see how the small new iron panels were patched in to keep the pans in good working order. The ringing of the pans as they were struck with hammers during repairs was a familiar sound in Cheshire, and certainly here at the Lion Salt Works would regularly wake inhabitants living nearby. This is the museum's subsiding house, always a great hit with children, but it underlies a serious point, that all the salt towns of Cheshire have suffered from serious subsidence, no more so than in Northwich. It is due to a combination of reasons. Firstly, hundreds of boreholes, drilled and then abandoned to supply brine for open-pan salt making, led to localised subsidence. Secondly, and far more importantly, was the impact of underground mining. For in 1670, in a chance find, salt deposits were found in nearby Marbury Park. This was the catalyst for wholesale and in some cases haphazard mining for the next couple of hundred of years. Sometimes the miners did not leave sufficient salt pillars to support the mines after excavation. But at other times, mine owners pumped the old mines for the salty water with which they rapidly filled, leading to crucial supports being dissolved. The impact was the same. There was subsidence, and in quite a number of cases, mines even collapsed. Here are a couple of pictures showing the impact of subsidence. From day to day, there could be subsidence in Northwich, and this led to ingenious solutions. Houses were built with wooden frames so that when subsidence occurred, they could be hydraulically jacked back in position. These houses, many of which still exist in Northwich, are unique to the Cheshire Plain. And so on to the warehouse and crushing mill. The crushing mill in Stovehouse 4 was powered by a steam engine and converted to electricity in the 1950s. Look how the salt has destroyed the cellular structure of the wood, so it looks like the mill might have been left to disintegrate underwater. The huge crushing mill towers over a gallery that contains a fascinating automaton of the salt works, a model of the site and information about the worldwide trade in Cheshire salt. During the era of the Thompson family, a key destination for salt from the works was Nigeria and was known as Lagos salt. However, the works was dangerously reliant on this market and so was crippled financially during the disruption caused by the Nigerian Civil War of the 1960s and thereafter by various military juntas. In the end, the Lion Salt Works was unable to stay profitable and closed its doors in 1986. Lastly, we come to the Landscape Gallery. This looks at the legacy of the salt industry on the landscape. So, for instance, collapsed mines left what are known locally as flashes. These are lakes formed by the depressions caused by mines that subsided and subsequently filled with water. This aerial picture shows the Adelaide flash, which you can see from the window in this gallery overlooking the canal. This flash was created by the collapse of the Adelaide mine. In other depressions, the local soda ash industry deposited lime waste that has now become a unique lime landscape featuring butterflies and orchids that thrive on this new habitat. Today, a patchwork of ecosystems exist, featuring lime-rich grasslands, rivers fringed with reed beds, and pockets of deciduous woodland. 2 walks can be accessed across the Northwich woodlands, just a 5-minute walk from the front gate of the museum. These orchid and dragonfly paths are suitable for walking or bikes and are well signposted. There is much else to see at the Lion Saltworks Museum, including the butterfly garden, the original manager's house, the smithy, and a rare example of a salt wagon. If you have used this commentary as you've gone round the museum, I hope you enjoy these other outdoor exhibits. If this has been a taster for a visit to the museum, we very much look forward to welcoming you in person very soon.